There never was such a woman to save money." This comfortable little bit of money thus spoken of amounted to some thousands, quite enough to justify Cuthbert Ollivant in the step he took immediately after his father's funeral. He sold the Long Sutton practice to Philby and Jackson, who already had 3/4 of the town on their books, and by this purchase established a monopoly. He would have sold his father's household goods also, but here his mother interposed. The chairs and tables might be old-fashioned, cumbrous, inelegant, but they were the chairs and tables she had known all her married life. 32 years, Cuthbert, think of that." "I do, mother, and for that very reason think we ought to begin our new life with new furniture." "I am too old to begin a new life, dear, and I like the old things best." This with a tender glance at an ancient Spanish mahogany sideboard that age had made almost as black as ebony. "They don't make such things now." "I'm rather glad they don't," remarked her profane son. "It will cost more money to move the things than they are worth, I believe, mother. But if you like them, they shall be moved. I'd as soon sit upon one chair as another. I have no artistic tastes." So the ancient sideboard, the secretaries and bureaus and 4-post bedsteads of a bygone age, all pervaded by a certain grimness that stood for respectability, were conveyed from Long Sutton to the house which Cuthbert Ollivant had taken for himself in Wimpole street, and being set up there, under Mrs. Ollivant's direction, made the London house almost as grim and dark and ancient looking as the home of Cuthbert's infancy. Perhaps Wimpole street itself is hardly the gayest or brightest of thoroughfares. Its length is to the stranger akin to despair, and it has hardly been dealt with as to width, whereby the shadow of Over the Way broods sullenly upon the fronts of the houses that turn their backs to the afternoon sun. But Wimpole street is eminently respectable, fashionable even, or at any rate appertaining to the West End; and Dr. Ollivant, he had taken the higher degree in Paris, and made haste now to obtain it in London, had chosen Wimpole street as a fair base for his operations. He had no more to do with Bethnal Green, but he gave 2 hours of every morning, from 8 till 10, to gratis patients. For the first year of his Wimpole street life they were almost his only patients. Then, little by little, his fame spread. He had taken to himself a specialty during his continental travels, namely the treatment of heart disease; had written a little book upon this theme, and published the same in London and Paris. By the aid of this book he advertised himself into the notice of a good many idle people who fancied they had the heart disease, and a few who were real sufferers. Rich old ladies and gentlemen who lived alone and lived too well, came to him, liked his manner, a grave and somewhat cold reserve, which was yet courteous, and implied profound wisdom, and made him their physician in ordinary. Ollivant on cardiac diseases and Ollivant on auscultation became almost standard works. In a word, Cuthbert Ollivant had succeeded, and by the time 5 years had run off the lease of the house in Wimpole street, had made for himself a position which he deemed the stepping stone to future distinction. His mother lived with him now, as she had lived with him from the beginning, the careful mistress of his house, the intelligent companion of his brief intervals of leisure. Her character presented a curious mixture of the ultra-prosaic with the intellectual and imaginative. She would lay down her volume of Wordsworth or Shelley to order the dinner or give out a week's supply of grocery. She made her son's money go farther than perhaps anyone else in the world could have made it go. She would not suffer a stale crust of bread or a basin of dripping to be wasted between January and December; yet she contrived to retain the respect of her servants, and was accounted a liberal mistress. Her son's simple dinners were ordered with a discretion and cooked with a nicety that could hardly have been exceeded at a West End club. Every detail of the table was perfection, though no modern elegance, no phantom-like glass or rich-hued majolica adorned the board. The old-fashioned heavily cut decanters, the ponderous plate, sparkled and shone upon the snowy linen, and pleasantest of all was the mother's face, a feminine likeness of the son's, with deep earnest eyes, white teeth, and mobile mouth. It was 9:30 a November night, a wet night in a wet autumn, the rain beating heavily on the skylight above the doctor's head. He had dined, and spent his after-dinner hour with his mother, talking literature and politics, for she made it her business to be interested and well informed in everything that interested her son, and had come down to his own room to read the last scientific book worth reading. An old-fashioned silver teapot, a breakfast cup and saucer stood on a Chippendale table at his elbow. The doctor smiled to himself as he poured out the tea, a grave, half-ironical smile.